was a long time ago, 80 odd years ago all this was going on. So does it matter? We remember it. I mean, most people here weren't even born then. I was, obviously, as Rainer said. And so that, while I was sitting there listening to Rainer, I thought, yeah, there's something I need to say other than what I'd kind of planned. So I'm going to risk it and say something I hadn't planned, but it's also the book that Rainer mentioned. This is my beaten up copy of it, which I'm going to read a little passage from, which relates to what Rainer was saying. Memory. Obviously, I was 4, 5, 6 years old during all this stuff, so I'm now 87, and do I remember what happened? Well, there's one very significant thing amongst others, which I'm going to read to you. I lived in Amsterdam, and we've got to get some water. I lived in Amsterdam. I don't know, have you been to Amsterdam, anybody? Yeah, it's a very pretty city, very lovely tall buildings, and the centre of Amsterdam is, what is it, 16th century, 17th century, you know, and it's still there. You know, most of it's been kind of preserved. Not in mothballs, but people still live in the same houses that they did all that time ago. Where we lived, and when I say we, obviously myself, I have an older sister, father, mother, and a grandmother who lived with us. We lived in a sort of 30s, 40s development, not the pretty bit of Amsterdam, but nevertheless, they still have the same kind of concept about, you know, living one story on top of another. So a lot of the houses in Amsterdam, you go in and you're met with these very steep staircases. I mean, they are steep. And so I'm going to read a little bit. I might have to use my magnifiers to see what I'm looking at. So I'm living in this a flat above a shop, and obviously we all lived there. The shop, it was a curious entrance. There was an entrance from the street, and as you went in, there, a little way away, was a very steep staircase going up to our flat. But on the right, as you went in, there was a shop with a door. You literally, you going off the street, on the right, you can walk into the shop through the door, or you walk a bit up there and then you go up the stairs. So, and my parents from time to time, because the shop was virtually within the same building, my parents would say from time to time, go and get whatever, loaf of bread, bottle of milk, whatever it was, which I did. So I'm now going to read from this book, which I wrote 4 or 5 years ago or something. I was 4 years old when I was confronted by a German soldier in the shop below our apartment, where I was sometimes sent by my parents to buy things. Well, I didn't buy them. I said to, can't remember the name now, it's for us, and he said, okay. So I never, no money exchanged hand. Well, I presume my parents used to pay the bill, but I don't know. The soldier asked me where I lived. In German. The German was close enough to Dutch for me to understand, and I pointed upstairs. He followed me, back up the sheer, narrow staircase, his rifle slung across his shoulder, and his heavy boots making an ominous bang, bang, bang on the wooden steps. I was 4 years old, I didn't know. 50 years on, I went back to show my daughter where I had once lived. I thought I might go in, if possible, to see if I remembered how it looked. I peered apprehensively through the downstairs letterbox, the outside door. And there was a steep staircase. It was a huge shock. 50 years vanished in an instant, and I was once again the young boy guilty of letting the soldier into our home. I had no desire to go in. That one little memory was so powerful, as you can tell, although I'd never been back to where I used to live, and I still haven't. I couldn't face the thought of what had happened, when I was 4 years old. So it's important, and everything, that happens in life, memories are powerful things. And, 80 odd years ago, obviously, people have memories, and that affects one's life. And I think it's the Jesuits have a saying, don't they, that give me the child till 7 and I'll show you the person. In other words, up to the age of 7, when all your basic concepts are formed about life and morality and the world, sure, they get modified, but they're there. That's your DNA. That's the bit that runs through you forever. And so it's terribly important to remember that. As Rainer said, I came to this country, I was 6 years old. I came with my mother and my sister. My father was murdered, my little sister was murdered, my grandmother was murdered, my 2 uncles were murdered, my aunt was murdered, and their offspring were murdered. So there was a lot there, and my mother, who actually was born over here, was English, obviously, and had gone to live in the Netherlands when she was a child of about 12 years old, with her parents, obviously, and that's where she met my father, who was Dutch, and they got married. So after the war, when she'd lost so much, she couldn't face the thought of going back to the Netherlands, certainly not to where we used to live. I mean, there were probably people living there, as happened a lot of the time, when people were taken off to the camps or shot or whatever, and other people just moved into their homes. And you can imagine trying to go back and somebody else is living there. Anyhow, she didn't want to go back to the Netherlands. So she brought myself and my other sister to England, and I've kind of more or less lived here ever since. Learned to speak the language, and to all intents and purposes, I'm British, English, whatever. And so that's really why I'm here. And while I've been here, I started making sculpture, I think Rainer mentioned, and the reason, I'll just say a couple of words why I wrote this book, because when you're in the art world and you paint or you make sculpture or whatever it is you do, people come along and look at it and say, oh yes, I can see what that's about. And they make up certain things about, and in my case, because the world is a small place, you go on internet and you can find out things about people. So they'd see one of my sculptures and then they'd connect with my history on the internet, and they'd make up all these ideas about where the sculpture comes from, what's it about, and this, that, and the other. Sometimes they're pretty good and pretty accurate. But on one occasion, the BBC commissioned a couple of films you may well have seen them, about the Holocaust and Belsen and so on. And one of the films, the guy who was making the film came to visit where I live, and of course I've got sculptures all over the place. And he started talking about, this looks like it's about this. And I said, Arthur, don't go on, because you may might be miles off the mark, or you may not. But, you know, he said, well, it's interesting. Anyhow, after a while, he didn't go on, and I thought, it's time that I took ownership of the story, if you like. Where's the work come from? What's the inspiration, if you want to put it that way? And so I started writing this book called The Art of Survival. And what it does is makes connections between early experiences and the work I'm making. These are not conscious attempts to illustrate stuff. Only on one occasion have I done that. But nevertheless, what emerges has its roots there, and I recognise that and admit that. So memory can be very conscious, or it can reside in places where, you know, you might not think it is, and then it can emerge.